for the beginning of our 2-day celebration of Shavuot. As we've all experienced many times already in the past year and several months of this global pandemic, while we have been very restricted in so many aspects of life, we have also had this great bracha, this great blessing of being able to gather as a community in different ways than we normally would be able to. And we're very pleased that we have several shuls from the conservative movement in our capital region represented here, as well as several rabbis who are present who will help lead our Torah study this evening or this afternoon. So Torah study is something that, of course, we value very highly and that we are going to discuss as part of our text study today. What is it about a life of Torah that makes a life of Torah? What it should be. And of course, on Shavuot, Shavuot is called Zman Matan Toratenu. It is the season or the time of the giving of Torah. And I always like to say that it's the time of the giving of Torah, but it's every day that is the time of receiving Torah and thinking about how we live a life of Torah. And we especially focus on that on Shavuot. So we never see Torah study as a purely an intellectual activity. We see it also as a sacred act. And so we recite a bracha before Torah study. And I'm going to invite everyone to join me in reciting the bracha for Torah study. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Praised are you, Adonai our God, ruler of time and space, who provides us a path to holiness through observance of your mitzvot, and who has instructed us to engage with words of Torah. Or as it has also been described, la'asok b'divrei Torah, to soak ourselves in words of Torah. So I look forward to a wonderful evening of doing just that, soaking ourselves in words of Torah and sharing that with all of you.
Oh, thank you so much, Rabbi Kival. It's a pleasure to be here together with all of you. We began, while some of you were here, with a music as we gathered, and I'd like to play that song again for us now to set the tone for our study and to open up our souls. So I'm going to do that. But while I play it, it's Mina Meitzar by Deborah Sachs-Mintz. While I play that, you will find that I sent the source sheet that we're going to be studying together in the chat, and it's available for anyone who would like to download. We'll also share screen when we get to that, but some people prefer to have their own copy. So I wanted to alert you to the fact that you can get it there in the chat box.
Mina mitzvah karatia anani b'merchav Mitzar karatia anani b'merchaviani Mitzar karatia anani b'merchaviani Adonai lo ira, vayaseh Yoseli Adama. Adonai lo ira, oh vayaseh Adama. Adonai lo ira, vayaseh Yoseli Adama. Adonai lo ira, oh vayaseh Adama. Mitzar karatia anani b'merchaviani Mitzar karatia anani Adonai lo ira, vayaseh Yoseli Adama. Adonai lo ira, oh vayaseh
Thank you. What we're going to do now is we're going to read through the text once together as a whole group. Rabbi Bev is going to take us through the text, and then after we've gone through it all together, we're going to split into small groups to go through the text again and to discuss it at greater length. So I'm going to share my screen and invite. Okay. Oops. All right.
to size this. Give me a minute to unsize it or to make it. I think I'm going to read it off my sheet.
All right.
Section 1, Civilization and Theory. Rabbi Yehuda is described as head of the speakers in every place. The Gemara asks, and why did they call him head of the speakers in every place? The Gemara relates that this resulted due to an incident that took place when Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon were sitting, and Yehuda, son of converts, sat beside them. Rabbi Yehuda opened and said, "How pleasant are the actions of this nation, the Romans, as they established marketplaces, established bridges, and established bathhouses." Rabbi Yossi was silent. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai responded and said, "Everything that they established only for their own purposes. They established marketplaces to place prostitutes in them, bathhouses to pamper themselves, and bridges to collect taxes from all who pass them." Yehuda, son of converts, went and related their statements to his household, and those statements continued to spread until they were heard by the monarchy. They ruled and said, "Yehuda, who elevated the Roman Empire, shall be elevated and appointed as head of the sages, the head of the speakers in every place. Yossi, who remained silent, shall be exiled from his home in Judea as punishment and sent to the city of Tzipori in the Galilee. And Shimon, who denounced the government, shall be killed." Section 2. Do I read the questions? No.
I think we can do the questions in a small group.
Okay. Emerging from the cave. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son Rabbi Elazar went and hid in the study hall. Every day, Rabbi Shimon's wife would bring them bread and a jug of water, and they would eat. When the decree intensified, Rabbi Shimon said to his son, "Women are easily impressionable, and therefore there is room for concern lest the authorities torture her and she reveal our whereabouts." They went and they hid in a cave. A miracle occurred and a carob tree was created for them, as well as a spring of water. They would remove their clothes and sit covered up in sand up to their necks. They would study Torah all day in that manner. At the time of prayer, they would dress, cover themselves, and pray, and they would again remove their clothes afterwards so they would not become tattered. They sat in the cave for 12 years. Elijah the prophet came and stood at the entrance to the cave and said, "Who will inform Bar Yochai that the emperor died and his decree has been abrogated?" They emerged from the cave and saw people who were plowing and sowing. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, "These people abandon eternal life of Torah study and engage in temporal life for their own sustenance." The Gemara relates that every place that Rabbi Shimon and his son Rabbi Elazar directed their eyes was immediately burned. A divine voice emerged and said to them, "Did you emerge from the cave in order to destroy my world? Return to the cave." They again went and sat there for 12 months. They said, "The judgment of the wicked in Gehenna lasts for 12 months. Surely their sin was atoned in that time. A divine voice emerged and said to them, "Emerge from your cave." They emerged. Everywhere that Rabbi Elazar would strike, Rabbi Shimon would heal. Rabbi Shimon said to Rabbi Elazar, "My son, you and I suffice for the entire world." As the sun was setting on Shabbat Eve, they saw an elderly man who was holding 2 bundles of myrtle branches and running at twilight. They said to him, "Why do you have these?" He said to them, "In honor of Shabbat." They said to him, "And let one suffice." He answered them, "One is corresponding to remember the Shabbat day, to keep it holy. And one is corresponding to observe the Shabbat day, to keep it holy." Rabbi Shimon said to his son, "See how beloved the mitzvot are to Israel." Their minds were put at ease. Section 3, Civilization in Practice. Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, Rabbi Shimon's son-in-law, heard and went out to greet him. He brought him into the bathhouse and began tending to his flesh. He saw that Rabbi Shimon had cracks in his skin on his body. He was crying, and the tears fell from his eyes and caused Rabbi Shimon pain. Rabbi Pinchas said to Rabbi Shimon, his father-in-law, "Woe is me that I have seen you like this." Rabbi Shimon said to him, "Happy are you that you have seen me like this, as had you not seen me like this, you would not have found in me this prominence in Torah, as the Gemara relates. At first, when Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai would raise a difficulty, Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair would respond to his question with 12 answers. Ultimately, when Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair would raise a difficulty, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai would respond with 24 answers. Rabbi Shimon said, "Since a miracle transpired for me, I will go and repair something for the sake of others in gratitude for God's kindness. As it is written, and Jacob came whole to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, when he came from Padan Aram, and he graced the countenance of the city." Rav said, what is the meaning of "and Jacob came whole"? Is whole in his body, whole in his money, whole in his Torah? And what did he do? And he graced the countenance of the city. He performed gracious acts to benefit the city. Rav said, Jacob established a currency for them. And Shmuel said, he established a marketplace for them. And Rabbi Yochanan said, he established bathhouses for them. He said, is there something that needs repair? They said to him, there is a place where there is uncertainty with regard to the ritual impurity, and the priests are troubled by being forced to circumvent it, as it is prohibited for them to become ritually impure from contact with the corpse. There was suspicion, but no certainty that a corpse was buried there. Therefore, they were able to definitively determine its status. They were unable to definitively determine its status. Rabbi Shimon said, is there a person who knows that there was a presumption of ritual purity here? Is there anyone who remembers a time when this place was not considered ritually impure, or that at least a part of it was considered to be ritually pure? An elder said to him, here Ben Zakkai planted and cut the truma of lupines. In this marketplace, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai who himself was a priest, once planted lupines that were given to him as truma. On that basis, the conclusion can be drawn that it was definitely ritually pure. Rabbi Shimon, like Jacob, also did so and took steps to improve the city and examine the ground. Everywhere that the ground was hard, he pronounced ritually pure, as there was certainly no corpse there. And every place that the ground was soft, he marked it, indicating that perhaps a corpse was buried there. In that way, he purified the place so that even priests could walk through it. A certain elder said in ridicule and surprise, Ben Yochai purified the cemetery. Rabbi Shimon got angry and said to him, had you not been with us, and even had you been with us and were not counted with us in rendering this ruling, what you say is fine. You could have said that you were unaware of my intention, or that you did not agree or participate in this decision. Now that you were with us and were counted with us in rendering this ruling, you will cause people to say that sages are unwilling to cooperate with one another. They will say, if competing prostitutes still apply makeup to each other to help one another look beautiful, all the more so that Torah scholars should cooperate with each other. He directed his eyes toward him, and the elder died. Rabbi Shimon went out to the marketplace, and he saw Yehuda, the son of converts. Rabbi Shimon said, this one still has a place in this world. He directed his eyes toward him and turned him into a pile of bones. That's our passage.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask Rabbi Dan to give us one reflection to start our conversation off, and then we're going to break off into breakout rooms, and each room will have an opportunity to go through the whole story again and discuss some of the questions. And but I think it would be nice to have the conversation started off all together.
Thank you, Rabbi Spitzer. So folks, Chag Sameach, the meditation is really perhaps two questions that maybe we can kind of use as anchors for a conversation. We rabbis have been having a lot of discussion about how this story, one of the things we say to our students all the time is, when you're learning Torah, ask the following three questions. And we say this to middle schoolers, we say this to high schoolers, we say this to adults. What is the story or the text saying? What does it mean? And what does it mean to me, right? What is its applicability now, right? How is it living Torah? So along those lines of how the story is living Torah for us, we've been talking a lot, and perhaps we can meditate upon this a little, about this idea of the emergence from caves. Shimon Bar Yochai is forced into a cave, right? He runs of his own volition, but really he's forced. If he doesn't do it, the Romans will get him. They'll murder him, right? And they'll murder Elazar, his son, as well. And in staying in that cave for protection, something happens to him, right? Where he just loses touch with the world. So an absolute necessity to preserve his life turns him into somebody who really forgets what it means to live, right? What it means for real people to be alive in the world. So how do we think about this story in terms of our own, as it were, emergence from the COVID cave? That's one thing to think about. And another thing that we may want to think about in this story is, Shimon Bar Yochai, attributed to him by the medieval mystical community, is that he sat in the cave for 12 years and he wrote the Zohar, the great mystical commentary on the Torah. Doesn't matter if he really did or not. That's the standard tradition. So he was so occupied with Devarim Birumo Shel Olam, in other words, things of the higher world, that when he emerged from the cave, right, which is really a metaphor for being completely wrapped up in the life of the mind, he doesn't know what to do again with real flesh and blood people who are just trying to survive and just trying to get along. So maybe the second meditation, beyond the whole issue of emerging from the COVID cave, is what does it mean for us as Jews, right? What is the tradition trying to help us to think about in terms of the balance between retreat, right? When we need to retreat into our own stuff, our own spiritual and intellectual stuff, and at the same time to balance that with engagement with people who are different from us, who we don't like, who make it difficult sometimes for us just to kind of feel comfortable day by day, but we have to get along with them. How do we balance those two, retreat and engagement, living the life of sort of, kind of just the mind, right? And also living with others.
Thank you. So I'm going to open the breakout rooms. I think if you've been pre-assigned, you will automatically go to a breakout room. And if you haven't yet been assigned, it's going to take a moment to sort everybody. But I think then everybody will be in a breakout room. Okay.
I had injections in my back and they seem to have worked, and I'm doing some behavioral changes such as not overworking myself and hoping to continue feel well. How are you?
I'm fine and dandy, fortunately.
Wonderful.
We just got back from the lake. We were up there for a few days, which was beautiful.
Oh, I bet. Have you seen Susan?
Yes, we went out to supper with them one night.
Oh, nice.
And we saw them. They're working hard on their property, as they always do. As did we. We did a lot of raking. We're so fortunate to be able to get away.
Yeah, it's been a beautiful few days. So
right.
Chag Shavuot Sameach to everybody in our room.
Hi, everyone.
Some of you I know, some of you I don't. I don't know.
Let's start.
Joseph Daslow. Hello.
Let's start by having an opportunity to introduce ourselves. I'm Rabbi Rafi Spitzer, the Rabbi of Congregation Agudat Achim in Niskayuna. Just finishing up my second year, though I do feel that it's been harder to meet people in the broader community this year than perhaps it would have been in other years. Kathy, would you like to also introduce yourself?
I am Kathy Engelbart, longtime congregant of Congregation Agudat Achim. I think we've been here about 40 years. I'd have to add up the years. I'm past president of Agudat Achim and remaining an involved member, and grateful to have Rabbi Spitzer as our rabbi. Thank you.
Joseph?
My name's Joe Baslow. I'm a 20-year member of Temple Israel, and I'm also a member of Temple Beth Joseph in Herkimer, and have been since the early 70s. well, actually, I grew up in that temple, and we moved to Albany a little over almost 21 years ago.
Richard.
I'm Richard Magidson. My wife, Beverly, and I have been in the Capital District since 1983 and in the city of Albany since 1992. Our home synagogue is where we usually daven is Ohav Shalom. We also go to Temple Israel from time to time. We're very active there, and we draw a lot of sustenance from that. And I'm happy we can be all together studying in some form for Shavuot, since we're not able to get together in person for Tikkunim.
And Barry.
I have been in Schenectady since we got married in 1963, and my husband's family I think he's the 5th generation. We have deep roots at Yebud Achim, and we're both very active in the community, and the synagogue means a great deal to both of us.
Well, great. So we just read quite a whopper of a story together. There are so many different aspects. I think that the guiding questions that Rabbi Ornstein proposed for us about thinking about emerging from the COVID cave, and also thinking about what it means to think about Torah study broadly and what it does for us, and I think are both really, really great questions. And I'd like to start by just asking if anybody has any initial reactions to the story that we read through very quickly just now, and then we can go through it a little more slowly and answer some of the questions on the study sheet and engage in conversation about it. So any reactions? Yeah, Joe.
One of the things that I would say puzzled me was that Rabbi Shimon, who condemned the Romans for the marketplaces, the bridges, there was a third thing, and I'm not, and the bathhouses. When he emerged from the cave finally after 13 years, he helped establish the currency, establish marketplaces, and other things. It didn't say he did bridges, but what is the message that he did that for which he criticized the Romans? And are we to assume his marketplaces were devoid of prostitutes, or is that something that they left out?
Well, great. I think that's a really great reaction, and that's why, by the way, we kept in section 3 of this story, right? If you just read sections 1 and 2, and it ended with, see how beloved the mitzvot are to Israel, their minds were put at ease, right? That's like a very nice, happy ending to this story. They went into the cave, they came out, they were changed by their experience of Torah, and then the people actually also taught them something, and they realized that they may have missed some engagement with Torah through actually doing things and not just thinking, right? But then we get section 3, and you sort of have to include section 3 in the story, because section 3 comes back to the themes of civilization, of the bathhouses, of the marketplaces, and so it's clearly a part of the story. The editor of this story intended that you should see the whole thing and not just 2/3 of it. And yet, once you read that third part, feels like the story ends with more questions than answers. What is the intent of the author? What is the intent of Rabbi Shimon? Why does it seem like these things are, what is the value ascribed to civilization and the aspects of civilization that are mentioned here. I think that's exactly a great insight, Joe. Any other reactions?
It's clear that Rabbi Shimon has lost none of the intensity of his personality. He's ready to destroy the world, and God tells him, no, don't destroy my world, go back in your cave. And he goes back in his cave and he comes out and he sees that, yes, things aren't as bad as he realized. And then in part 3, he reverts to almost to his former self. And we find that the Jews are, Yaakov Avinu did the same things that the Romans did, and for him it was a good thing. But when he encounters Rabbi Yehuda, who talked about the Romans doing this thing in a positive way, he's still so angry at him that he glares at him so that he physically destroys Rabbi Yehuda. It's like, wow, there's more going on here than just building bathhouses. There's something. It's like, what's behind it? It's like, what's the motivation?
Yeah. One of the questions that we proposed as overall guiding questions speaks to your point, Richard, which is, do you find any positive role models in this story? Do any of the characters change, or do the characters stay the same? Right? Is there a narrative arc here where the character doesn't know something at the beginning, experiences happen, and then the character has grown? Or is there something about this character that is not redeemable, that the character doesn't seem to grow? And in what way is that a part of this story? Can you be 13 years engaged with Torah and only Torah, and then come out and still be the same, not so nice person that you were before, right? Okay, Kathy, I think you had something you wanted to say.
Let's see.
Kathy, you're on mute.
Am I okay now?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. In regards to what Rabbi Spitzer just said, I thought Rabbi Shimon was a role model in that he looked at what needs to be repaired and how can I repair it. And he took steps to improve the city. But what I was going to say before was, in light of COVID, at least for me, I really could get into being buried in the sand and studying Torah for 12 years and not having to engage with any reality, and just be a brain in a bottle, in a sense, and then get up and change my clothes and go pray and then get back in the sand. It sounds like a wonderful spa opportunity, and what a luxury. What a luxury to be able to sit in the cave and engage in Torah. But we all have to come out of the cave and meet what's going on in our world.
Barry, I don't have the visual cue to know if you have something you want to say, so you have to jump in there.
I'm just listening.
All right.
Humanity is flawed. That's the message I've gotten.
Yeah. Joe.
One of going back to the establishment of commercial and governmental activities, can we look at this that Rabbi Shimon was opposed to the Romans because they were conquerors, and we can assume that he was not a conqueror, but rather part of the community doing these things? And should that, in fact, how should that affect our evaluation of what the people were, of the worth of the event, looking at the person who established it?
Mm-hmm. Is the issue civilization, or is the issue imperialism? Yeah,
I mean, is he right to criticize it if it was an imperial act, by the Romans, or were the marketplaces and the bridges necessary regardless of who built them, or was the price too high that you had the imperialists doing the building?
Yeah.
He was claiming that the Romans were doing this for their own benefit rather than for the benefit of the local community, and he was doing it for the benefit of the local community.
And that being said, could the even though the Romans were doing it in a certain sense for their benefit, which from their point of view, they were big on collecting taxes and being able to move their troops here and there. But if it also enabled farmers to get their produce to market, people to get to wherever, was there, and a marketplace to sell them, was there not a benefit to the community as a whole? In other words, was there not some synergy there?
Right. Right. What do you think? Do you have a sense?
Myself?
Yeah, I mean, I guess one question that I have for you is, do you think that the view of Rabbi Shimon about the question you just asked is the same as the view of the author of the story, right? Or do you think that Rabbi Shimon is presenting one approach and the story itself is presenting a different approach?
You've got me there.
Mhm.
I haven't thought it through well enough, or I may not even be able to. But it's an interesting issue.
For one, this is Jonah.
Hi.
Hi, Jonah.
Jonah is joining us because
Yeah.
he wants to be held.
Oh, he's getting to be such a big boy.
Yeah, he's 5 months old today.
Oh my goodness.
Is how did that happen? I don't know. All right, so let's go through the source again. Let's read the story, and I think maybe as we go through, we can perhaps come to maybe some answers around Joe's questions and some of our other questions and thoughts. So I'm going to share my screen so that if you don't have it right in front of you, you can have it. And if you, you're welcome to follow along with me in that way. All right, so we'll just start by reading the questions. The word tikkun, like tikkun olam and tikkun Erev Shavuot, means to establish, to correct, to improve. It is a word which repeats over and over throughout this whole story. What is established or corrected in the story? Who does the establishing? Who does the correcting? And what changes throughout the whole story with regard to things which are established? And as we go through, I will point out where the English refers to the English translation refers to the word tikkun. With regard to characters, do you find any positive role models, negative role models? Do any of the characters change, and how, in what way do they change? And then I think Kathy started us off by thinking about this question of the life of Torah. What is the ideal life of Torah in this text? Oh, Kathy said, well, it would be kind of like a spa to just be able to study Torah all the time. And I guess I have the same question to Kathy that I had to Joe, which is, do you think that the message of the story as a whole is that a life of Torah should be practiced as a brain in a jar? Or do you think that's only part of the story? And so in what way is that, does the whole story agree or disagree with the proposition that a life of Torah should be, the brain in the jar kind of model? So let's jump in. Would somebody like to read the first section? Joe.
Sure. You want me to read it? I will. Rabbi Yehuda is described as head of the speakers in every place. The Gemara asks, and why did they call him head of the speakers in every place? The Gemara relates that this resulted due to an incident that took place when Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon were sitting, and Rabbi Yehuda, the son of converts, sat beside them. Rabbi Yehuda opened and said, "How pleasant are the actions of this nation, the Romans, as they establish marketplaces, establish bridges, and establish bathhouses."
All right.
Rabbi Yossi was silent.
Stop there for a second. Do you think that it matters at all that Yehuda here is identified as the son of converts? Yeah, Kathy.
I found that strange. They say it a couple times, if not at least two. And in my understanding, we are not supposed to differentiate between the convert and somebody who's born into the Jewish religion.
Yeah, it's a great point. Yeah, Richard.
Well, I think they identify him that way because it's critical to understand what happens next in the story. He goes home and he talks to his parents about what he heard, and his parents go on and they're being non-Jews. They go and tell the Romans. So it's like the genie got out of the bottle. It wasn't really. It wouldn't have happened that way if Rabbi Yehuda had been Jew by birth as opposed to Jew by choice.
Well, but his parents were Jews at the time of the story.
Right. Yeah, it says son of
extended
convert,
family
so
were
they were
converts.
Jewish.
Word got out, and the Romans found out about him and got after him.
Right. I think, Richard, I think you're right. I think that in some respects, it's a detail that's important to the narrative because of exactly what you're saying, right? The word got out, not through Rabbi Yehuda's intention, but because of the people that Rabbi Yehuda was associating with. Somebody was an informer for the government. And I also, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I do think that this story does present a bit of an uncomfortable voice with regard to the aspect of welcoming or being unwelcoming of Jews by choice. And I think, like, I wouldn't have mentioned it except that Shavuot is the holiday of everybody being a Jew by choice, right? Of Ruth choosing Judaism, and in a sense of us all choosing to receive the Torah at Sinai and choosing to be choosing Torah, choosing a life of connection to Judaism. And so I think that, right, one of the things that we have to grapple with is how does this view of conversion to Judaism, in what ways are we comfortable with it, uncomfortable with it, and how does it impact the story? So, and I do think that it's related to Shavuot more broadly. Okay, I interrupted you at established bathhouses.
You want me to continue or somebody else?
Continue.
To place prostitutes in them, bathhouses to pamper themselves, and bridges to collect taxes from all who pass over them. Yehuda, son of converts, went and related their statements to his household, and those statements continued to spread until they were heard by the monarchy. They ruled and said, Yehuda, who elevated the Roman regime, shall be elevated and appointed as head of the sages, the head of the speakers in every place. Yossi, who remained silent, shall be exiled from his home in Judea as punishment and sent to the city of Zipporah in the Galilee. And Shimon, who denounced the government, shall be killed.
Right. So I think, right, one of the themes that runs through this whole story is this question about worldly things. What worldly things or aspects of secular civilization appear here? And of course, we've got the bridges, the bathhouses, and the marketplaces. Now, I guess one question that I have, are all of these equivalent? marketplaces the same as bathhouses in the eyes of the rabbis? You know,
I would respond that they're all deemed important. The bridges are, transportation is important to keep a nation or community going.
Yep.
The marketplace is good for people, to help people make livings. And we need diversion from everyday life. And so the bathhouses connote diversion. The one thing that's missing are places of study.
Fascinating, right? So you're saying, okay, these aren't simply bridges, marketplaces, and bathhouses. We're talking about categories of things in society. We've got commerce, right? We've got transportation or infrastructure, we might say. We've got so we've got commerce, we've got transportation, and we've got entertainment or culture or diversion, right? Entertainment. Now, notice that it's bathhouses, not, you know, doesn't mention the arena, the stadium, right? Those also existed, but it doesn't mention them. It's a specific kind of entertainment. It's an entertainment with a cleanliness aspect. And later in the text, the rabbis themselves go to the bathhouse, right? They're very much connected in that way. So great. And one aspect of civilization that isn't mentioned, the category that's not mentioned here, is education, right? We don't have the Beit Midrash, the school, the gymnasium, the study place. That's also an important part of civilization. Kathy, you had something to say.
I mean, the bathhouse could be mikveh. You have to have mikveh. So, I mean, to me, when you read this, it sounds like, oh, bathhouses that are just for the men or for pleasure, but a bathhouse is also mikveh. Correct or not?
I don't think those are the same institution, but the rabbis had nothing against bathhouses. They did use them regularly for cleanliness. That's
Yeah, well, we had to have ritual immersion.
That's another factor. That's a separate thing. Bathhouses are not the same as mikvahs, but they're both necessary for Jewish civilization.
Okay, I was just thinking
cleanliness and ritual purity are both necessary.
I was thinking that in saying bathhouses, it sounded like something not so okay, but the bathhouses were ritual immersion places.
Right. So the rules around ritual immersion do not include places of drawn water like a bathhouse as being a kosher for ritual immersion. And if you go to Israel, you can see the difference between the mikvaot that were clearly for the purpose of ritual immersion and the bathhouses that you can find, the ruins of the Roman bathhouses that, you know, many different rooms, and the hot water and the cool water and the cold water, and you had to dunk in a particular order, and there was a whole process with it. And so both of those things existed in that time period. But I think what you're pointing out is really an interesting thing, which is, you know, a bathhouse type place could be used for nefarious purposes or ritual purposes. Right. A marketplace can be a place where you buy your food for Shabbat and where you sell tefillin and where you make a livelihood that then you give a portion of it to tzedakah. Or the market can be a place where you interact with, you know, uncomfortable or unsanctioned aspects.
Unsavory
characters. Unsavory, yeah. A bridge.
Exploitation of labor. Right. That
can represent the exploitation of commerce, but it can also represent the importance of connecting one community to another community across a river.
Yes.
So I think, right, in terms of our own attitude toward technology and worldly things, to me, right, it's sort of this, you know, here we are, we're doing this study session on Zoom. And so in what would the rabbis have thought of this technology? Would it have gone into this category? Like, would people have said, you know, oh, how great are the Americans because they came up with Zoom, you know, right? That we can connect people together, or people might be like, no, Zoom is a place, you know, where I don't know, online like bullying, or I don't know. There's a darker side to technology.
Always a double-edged sword.
That's
It's always a
what
double-edged
the
sword. It can
analog
be
today
for
is.
good or for evil.
Yeah. All right. Richard, do you want to read the second section?
Sure.
Or at least the first paragraph?
Okay. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son Rabbi Elazar went and hid in the study hall. Every day, Rabbi Shimon's wife would bring them bread and a jug of water, and they would eat. But the decree intensified, and Rabbi Shimon said to his son, women are easily impressionable, and therefore there is room for concern, lest the authorities torture her and she reveal our whereabouts. I won't divert into that issue, that whole issue there.
Well, I do think
so they did not feel safe where they were. You know, they were afraid they might be betrayed. So they went and they hid in the cave. A miracle occurred, and a carob tree was created for them, as well as a spring of water. They would remove their clothes and sit covered in sand up to their necks and would study Torah all day in that manner. At the time of prayer, they would dress, cover themselves, and pray, and they would again remove their clothes afterwards so they would not become tattered. This way, they sat in the cave this way for 12 years. Elijah the prophet came and stood at the entrance to the cave and said, who will inform Bar Yochai that the emperor died and his decree has been abrogated? You can come out now. So they emerged from the cave and saw people who were plowing and sowing. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, these people abandon the eternal life of Torah study, engage in temporal life for their own sustenance. The Gemara relates that every place that Rabbi Shimon and his son Rabbi Elazar directed their eyes was immediately burned. A divine voice emerged and said to them, did you emerge from the cave in order to destroy my world? Return to your cave. So they again went and sat there for 12 months. And they said, the judgments of the wicked in Gehenna lasts for 12 months. So surely their sin must have been atoned for their sin must have been atoned in that time. They realized they hadn't done the right thing by being so negative about the world. And so they themselves the same time for the same period of time that a sinner would be judged in hell. So now a divine voice and said to them, emerge from your cave, and they emerged. Rabbi Elazar would strike, Rabbi Shimon would heal. Rabbi Shimon said to Rabbi Elazar, my son, you and I suffice for the entire world. I'm not sure I fully understand the meaning of that statement. But at any rate, as the sun was setting on Shabbat Eve, they saw an elderly man holding 2 bundles of myrtle branches and running at twilight. They said to him, why do you have these? He said to them, in honor of Shabbat. They said to him, but let one suffice. And he answered them, one is corresponding to remember the Shabbat day to keep it holy, as the 4th commandment is stated in Exodus, and the other is corresponding to observe the Shabbat day to keep it holy, a slightly different wording for the same commandment in Deuteronomy. Rabbi Shimon said to his son, see how beloved the mitzvot are to Israel. And then their minds were put at ease. They realized that mitzvot had not been totally abrogated. They were still being observed. not only observe, but observe with love and devotion.
All right. So what do you think is the attitude of this text toward this life of just focusing on Torah study? Is it good?
How about if we say too much of a good thing?
Okay.
All good things in the world are good up to a point, and then beyond that point, they may not be so good.
12 years is a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, long time.
Yeah.
And then they came out.
12 years is a long time.
Yeah. They were really absent for a long time, and then they came out, and even then had to go back for 12 months.
Right.
A question I have is, why is it, having spent 12 years in the cave studying Torah, every place they looked was destructive? That's the message. What's the message of that? I would like to pose that for you, Rabbi.
No. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a huge question, right? They're so focused on Torah that when they come out and they see that not everybody else was focused on Torah, right? They feel like the fact that not everybody was focused on Torah was worthy of burning the world up over.
But they missed action. They studied Torah, but they didn't apply it to living Torah.
That's exactly what I was going to say, Kathy. Isn't that the message of Tikkun Olam? Aren't you supposed to take the principles of the Torah and act them out?
Great. Yeah, that's a wonderful point, Barry. And look, I mean, to me, the answer to the question that we asked at the very beginning of, are there any role models in this story? Like, to me, this elderly man who's holding 2 bunches of myrtle, one for Shamor and one for Zachor, right? This is how I'm keeping Shabbos. I'm keeping Shabbos by having, good smelling branches in my house for Shabbat, and not just one, but 2 bundles, so that I can really put into practice this biblical biblical verses of Shamor and Zachor, right? To me, I think that person is the story's ideal practitioner of Judaism.
I agree.
I think the person who wrote the story liked this elderly man more than the rabbis who spent 13 years in the cave. But
from the Musar class, which I've been enjoying and has been so meaningful to me, it really drove home to me the point of action, that Judaism and the tenets of Judaism, study is wonderful and it's a luxury, but we need to have action as well.
Yeah, I guess, right, study is one action of many actions which are important to Jewish life. So I think, right, Barry pointed to the point that if you're studying alone in a cave, then you can't do good. You can't do Tikkun Olam. Right? We've spent the last 14 months or so in our COVID caves. In what ways is it easier or harder to be holy in a cave? Right? From our experience of being home for 14 months, in what ways is it easier or harder to strive for holiness out in the world? Do you think that you've been changed or affected by your living in isolation for all this time? Has it helped with your holiness? Has it hindered your holiness?
Well, the study and the isolation, I'm an introvert, so it has helped me. I've been able to delve into areas without the distractions of the outside world. And there are parts of that that I really want to keep. But I also recognize that it's important to emerge from the cave and to be participatory in the world to whatever degree I can be.
Anyone else?
Well, I guess I feel kind of fortunate that the pandemic hasn't affected me nearly as deeply as it has affected so many other people. I don't quite feel qualified to comment. It's, beyond just observing and reading about what goes on in the rest of the world, thinking, wow, what a horror this is, and how are we, we're definitely being transformed by this. The question is whether it'll be ultimately for better or for worse, and it's up to us. And different people are going to handle it in different ways, and we hope it'll all be for the better.
Yeah. Is it all right? So we talked a little bit about this, the ideal life of Torah. It feels to me like in this text, the ideal life of Torah is about living Torah in the world, not about the quantity of knowledge, right? That the ideal life of Torah is the person who can quote Torah in order to keep Shabbat in a more beautiful way. That's a beautiful way to have study be connected to life. And if the story ended here, we would say, okay, wow, like everything that Rabbi Elazar, who is younger and more
passionate,
everything that he got upset about, Rabbi Shimon was able to heal, and they had this moment, and Rabbi Shimon like really learned something. He grew. Maybe even he was able to teach his son something about the importance of actions in Jewish life. But then we have the final section. I did. Mama asked me to turn it off in 5 minutes, and I looked at the clock and turned it off. Okay, so we've got this ending where Rabbi Shimon's son-in-law, he brings Rabbi Shimon to the bathhouse, and he's so sad because after living under dirt for 13 years, his skin is all got cracks in it, and as you can imagine, probably like that's not great for your body, right? This was as Kathy said at the beginning, it's the brain in the jar, right? But we actually live embodied lives. But this is sort of, I think this story represents the Talmud's imagination of what it must be like to be, without a body altogether, right? This is the closest it can come to it. So then he's at the bathhouse, and it's significant that it's a bathhouse. And it's upsetting that his body is like this, but Rabbi Shimon really, really comes out of it with more Jewish knowledge. Now Rabbi Shimon he's got all the answers. And then Rabbi Shimon quotes the Midrash that says that Jacob established commerce and marketplaces and bathhouses. And so he says, how can I be like Jacob? And what does he do? He takes a place of uncertain purity and he purifies it. Well, he doesn't even really purify it. He marks the part that's impure and the part that's pure so that it's no longer uncertain. He brings certainty to it. Okay. Now this is, I think, part of Rabbi Shimon's thing is that he really cares about certainty. He's bringing certainty to something. That's very in character. Oh, I see that all participants have been given 120 seconds. So we're very close to the end. So I guess I just want to ask you guys, do you have any concluding questions, concluding comments? What does it mean? Will there be a tikkun for the world as we leave the cave of our pandemic? Can we heal and not burn up the world? What is the ultimate teaching of this text? Any thoughts?
I like that. You'd have to scroll up for a second if you could. The first paragraph, that when he sees a miracle, he does a mitzvah. The gratitude to God. Rabbi Shimon said, "Since a miracle transpired for me, I will go and repair the world." That to me is a comforting response.
It's comforting, and yet he still has that same intensity when somebody challenges him. He reverts to form. He
still turns him into a pile of bones.
There, and his original, and then he gets back to his original nemesis, Rabbi Yehuda, and he kills him in especially graphic terms.
True.
Turns him into a pile of bones.
True.
So he's still the same Rabbi Shimon, but
repairing the world, but forgetting the personal.
Yeah.
Shades and in the head of the hospital. It was wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much. I see that we're all returning back. I hope that the conversations in the breakout rooms were meaningful and that people learned something and were able to engage with this story on a deeper level. I think it's really nice that we were all able to connect to the same text, even though we were all doing it in different rooms. And we're going to close with a Kaddish de Rabbanan, which we'll do in just a moment. But before we close with that, I thought we would listen to the same music that we started with from Hallel, Min HaMeitzar Karati Ya, from the depths I called to you, God. And I think that there's something very connected about this idea of emerging from the cave in this passage from Psalms, and especially in the tune that almost Rabbi Deborah Sachs-Mintz has written. So I'm going to share my screen one more time.
Min HaMeitzar Karati Anani B'merchav Yami HaMeitzar Karati Anani B'merchav Yami Min HaMeitzar Karati Anani B'merchav Yami HaMeitzar Karati Anani B'merchav Yami Adonai lo ira יעשה, יעשה לי אדם. אדוני לי לא יירא, מה יעשה לי אדם. מן המצר קראתי לה, ענני במרחב ימי. המצר קראתי לה, ענני במרחב ימי. יעשה לי אדם, אדוני לי לא יירא, מה יעשה לי אדם.
I'd just like to put Rabbi Gulak a little bit on the spot and see if she would have any closing thought before we do Kaddish D'Rabbanan.
Surprise. We were talking about how judgmental Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is and how that's such a problem. And I shared that I had studied this text with inmates in 2 different prisons, and as long as I'm preparing a text for something, I use it all over. And one of the inmates was like really upset with Yochanan ben Zakkai. He was like, this guy is just so judgmental and like can't live with what anybody else is doing, right? And that's evil in some ways. And I compare him to Judah Maccabee, and I always say to people when I'm teaching about Hanukkah, would you invite Judah Maccabee to your house? He'll smash your TV set, he'll break your internet connection, and they'll say, you shouldn't be doing all this other secular stuff you're doing. You should just be studying Torah, right? And yet we hold these guys up as heroes and role models. All this thing at Meron, people were going up to Yochanan ben Zakkai's grave. I'm sorry, to Shimon Bar Yochai's grave. And so we live with this tension of holding this idea that you can do Judaism in a cave, you can do Judaism so perfectly in isolation, with really holiness is with people and interacting with society. And how do we come back to that after our time in the cave?
Thank you. I'd just like to offer gratitude first to my colleagues Rabbi Kival, Rabbi Ornstein, Rabbi Elligberg, Rabbi Gulak, and Rabbi Magidson. Thank you all for being here and for learning together with us. And then also to everybody who came, thank you so much for joining us. And I hope that you have a Chag truly sameach, and that we are all able to merit to receive the Torah, together. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rabbi Elligberg to close us out with Kaddish D'Rabbanan.
I'll invite everyone to rise as able, and we'll join together. I apologize, I don't have Kaddish D'Rabbanan to share on my screen. Maybe next year.
Just we should all unmute.
It's on page 20.
Join together. Yitgadal, Yitgadash, Shemei Rabbah, Yalma, Dibrak,
That it's an important problem, and thank you for handling it. Anyway,
Amen. Amen. Chag Sameach, everyone. Moadim L'Simcha.
Sameach.